The crash lasted 4 seconds. Traffic camera footage later showed the silver Nova Drive A9 entering the intersection at 7:42:01 a.m. Clear sky, dry pavement, moderate suburban traffic. The Brooks vehicle was operating in full autonomous mode. Daniel Brooks, 46, software sales executive, had engaged autonomy level 4 20 minutes earlier on Highway 101. According to vehicle telemetry, his hands had not touched the steering wheel in the last 12 minutes before impact. In the back seat, his 8-year-old daughter Lila was buckled in, reviewing vocabulary flashcards on a tablet. At 7:42:02.114, the A9's forward sensors registered a yellow traffic signal. The braking protocol engaged. At 7:42:02.931, a remote diagnostic override command was received. At 7:42 and 3 seconds, the braking system disengaged. At 7:42 and 3 seconds, 821 thousandths, the vehicle entered the intersection at 52 miles per hour. At 7:42 and 4 seconds, it collided with a white SUV traveling westbound. Daniel Brooks and his daughter were pronounced dead at the scene. By noon, Nova Drive issued a press release. Preliminary analysis indicates manual interference with the autonomous operation. We extend our condolences to the family and are cooperating fully with authorities. Financial markets responded briefly. Nova Drive stock dipped 2.8% in early trading. By closing bell, it had recovered. News anchors repeated a familiar phrase: driver error. On the 7th floor of Nova Drive's Silicon Valley headquarters, Priya Shah watched the crash footage alone. She had not known Daniel Brooks. She had not known Lila, but she knew braking algorithms. And brake commands do not disengage without instruction. Priya was 27 years old, a Stanford graduate with a master's degree in systems engineering. She joined Nova Drive 3 years earlier, drawn by the company's mission statement, eliminating preventable human error. Her department, Autonomous Systems Integrity, handled anomaly detection. They reviewed incidents, verified system behavior, and ensured that software aligned with federal safety standards. She believed in the technology. Autonomous vehicles properly implemented could reduce traffic fatalities by an estimated 90%. That statistic was repeated often at conferences. She had helped present it, but the Brooks crash log troubled her immediately, because at 7:42:03, something happened that shouldn't have. Crash logs were stored in a secure internal dashboard. Each incident was assigned an ID. Brooks crash, incident 4473. Priya opened the raw telemetry feed, line by line, timestamp by timestamp. Autonomous braking engaged, correct. Obstacle detection, clear, correct. Traffic light classification, yellow. Predictive deceleration curve, normal. Then 7:42:02.931. Remote diagnostic override initiated 7:42:03.002. Brake release command executed. She stopped scrolling. Remote diagnostic override, those commands were reserved for fleet-wide system testing, not live consumer vehicles in active traffic conditions. She scrolled further. 7:42:03.004. Log deletion request queued. She leaned back. Deletion requests did not appear in crash summaries. She refreshed the dashboard. Access denied. The incident file had been moved, reclassified under executive review protocol. That had never happened before. Under federal regulations, autonomous vehicle companies were required to preserve crash logs for regulatory review. They were not permitted to delete telemetry. Logs could be sealed for legal reasons, but not erased. Priya accessed a mirrored redundancy server, an older backup cluster scheduled for decommission. If deletion had occurred recently, the mirror might still contain residual data. It did. The raw packet trace remained intact. She downloaded a copy to her workstation. She hesitated. Then she encrypted the file and transferred it to an external solid-state drive she kept in her bag for personal code projects. It wasn't standard protocol, but neither was what she had just seen. The following morning, an internal memo circulated. Subject: Data Retention Alignment. Update: Effective immediately, All A9 crash diagnostics were centralized under executive authorization. Engineering access would require written approval. Priya read the memo twice. It was framed as a streamlining measure, but she recognized containment language when she saw it. Her supervisor, Ethan Cole, called her into his glass-walled office that afternoon. Ethan was in his early 40s, calm, measured, former aerospace engineer. "You've been querying 4473 repeatedly," he said without accusation. "Yes, it's under review." "I saw a remote override." Ethan held her gaze. "There are diagnostic layers you're not cleared for." "Was it a malfunction?" He paused. "Let it go, Priya." It wasn't an answer. That night, Priya returned to the backup mirror. She traced the remote override AP origin. It mapped to an internal cluster labeled RDX-theta. She had never heard of it. She searched internal documentation. Nothing surfaced. She dug deeper into archived repository commits. One entry from 18 months prior referenced adaptive risk exchange, phase beta. She opened the associated code branch. At first glance, it resembled a predictive intervention model designed to analyze unavoidable collision scenarios. Such systems were common in autonomy research. When an impact was mathematically unavoidable, the algorithm determined the safest possible outcome. But as she read deeper, she found a function that did not belong in a purely safety-driven model. Liability exposure weight. The function calculated projected corporate legal risk. Inputs included estimated number of third-party injuries, property damage scale, insurance multiplier projections, litigation history modeling. The function output adjusted the intervention pathway score. In plain terms, the system weighed not only physical outcomes, but financial consequences. Priya closed her laptop slowly because the Brooks crash was no longer a malfunction. It was a decision. She ran a simulation. If the brake override had not occurred, the A9 would have entered a cross-traffic pattern involving a city shuttle bus. Projected injuries, 18 to 24. Projected fatalities, uncertain. Projected liability, catastrophic. Instead, the system released braking pressure for less than a second, redirected impact vector, contained collision to one vehicle, 2 fatalities, lower projected litigation ceiling. The code did not use words like death. It used probability matrices, optimization scores, exposure thresholds. But the meaning was unmistakable. 3 nights later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. "Priya Shah?" the voice asked. "Yes. You've been accessing RDX theta." It was not a question. "Who is this?" "Consider this a professional courtesy." Her pulse accelerated. "You're drawing conclusions without context." "Context doesn't erase the override," she replied. Silence. "Be careful," the voice said softly. The line disconnected. She stood in her kitchen, phone still in her hand. They knew. The next morning, a mandatory internal device audit was announced. All engineering workstations would undergo security scans. Unauthorized data retention would result in immediate termination. Priya understood the message. She went home early. She copied the encrypted crash log twice more. One drive she sealed in waterproof wrapping and hid inside a hollowed programming textbook on her shelf. The other she encrypted again and uploaded to a distributed storage network under anonymized credentials. She wasn't planning a leak. Not yet. She was building redundancy. Because systems fail. And sometimes systems lie. On her way home that evening, Priya drove manually. She did not activate autonomous mode. At a red light, she watched the brake pedal beneath her foot. Physical, direct, unmediated. In the distance, a Nova Drive I-9 passed through an intersection smoothly. Perfect, trustworthy, market-leading. And somewhere in its code base, buried beneath safety statistics and marketing language, an algorithm was calculating outcomes in dollars, not lives. Priya tightened her grip on the steering wheel. She no longer believed the crash was an accident. She believed it was optimized, and now she had proof. Priya did not report her findings immediately. Engineers are trained to question their own conclusions before questioning the system. So she started again, from scratch. She cleared her simulation cache and reopened the RDX Theta branch, inside a controlled sandbox environment disconnected from the main network. If there was bias in her interpretation, she would find it. She searched for every incident in the last 24 months involving autonomous braking disengagement, remote diagnostic ping, fatality or severe injury classification. 4 results appeared. She already knew incident 4,473, the Brooks crash. The others, incident 3,912, Phoenix, Arizona, incident 4,027, Austin, Texas, incident 4,299, Sacramento, California, all labeled driver misuse final, all cleared within weeks, all involving Nova Drive and 9 vehicles. Her pulse slowed instead of quickening. Patterns are calmer than chaos. Patterns mean design. The Phoenix case involved a rideshare passenger in a delivery van. The Nova Drive vehicle entered an intersection during a protected left turn. A pedestrian had stepped unexpectedly into the crosswalk. The system initiated evasive braking. Telemetry showed a remote override for 0.6 seconds. The vehicle veered slightly right. It struck the delivery van instead of continuing straight into a group of pedestrians waiting at the median. 1 fatality, the van driver. Official report conclusion. Driver failed to maintain situational awareness. But the Nova Drive vehicle had been in full autonomous mode. And again, deletion request queued. In Austin, the A9 was traveling on a highway ramp during heavy rain. Hydroplaning risk elevated. Forward sensors detected stalled traffic beyond the crest of the ramp. Braking engaged. Override initiated. Brake pressure modulated downward. The vehicle struck a compact sedan at high velocity instead of colliding with a tanker truck 2 lanes over. 2 severe injuries, no fatalities. Official cause, adverse weather interference. The override again originated from RDSX Theta. Sacramento was quieter, less media coverage, single vehicle collision. Autonomous mode engaged. Brake command interrupted for 0.4 seconds. The vehicle hit a roadside barrier rather than swerving into oncoming traffic. Passenger fatality. Driver survived. Manual interference suspected. But telemetry showed no steering wheel contact, only the override. Priya stared at the 4 incidents aligned side by side. Different states, different weather conditions, different traffic configurations, same intervention signature. Remote diagnostic override. Milliseconds of brake release. Collision vector redirection. Contained damage. She rebuilt each scenario in the sandbox simulator using raw telemetry inputs. She disabled RDX Theta and ran the Brooks crash without override. Result, multi-vehicle collision involving city shuttle bus. Projected injury count, 19 to 27. Potential fatalities, 3 to 8. She re-enabled RDX Theta. Result, single vehicle impact. 2 fatalities. Lower projected litigation cluster. She ran Phoenix. Without override, pedestrian cluster casualty risk high. With override, single van fatality. She ran Austin. Without override, tanker truck multi-vehicle cascade. With override, contained 2-car impact. Sacramento. Without override, head-on cross-lane collision. With override, roadside barrier fatality. Every simulation followed the same logic tree. When catastrophic exposure probability exceeded a defined threshold, RDX Theta adjusted braking output to redirect impact toward the statistically lower liability pathway. The code comment above the decision block read // scenario containment, prioritization containment, not prevention. Priya had written safety code before. True safety models minimize harm, period. They evaluate biomechanical thresholds, impact force distribution, pedestrian density, survivability, probability. They do not incorporate corporate financial exposure, but RDX Theta did. The liability exposure weight, open parenthesis, close parenthesis function multiplied, projected injury count by a litigation severity constant derived from historical settlement averages. The output altered collision trajectory, selection when, projected catastrophic liability, greater than containment, liability times exposure multiplier. It was clinical, mathematical, cold, bitutti. The system was not randomly sacrificing individuals. It was preventing large-scale liability events. In effect, it was deciding better to lose one family than risk 20, better to contain tragedy than allow catastrophe. From a purely corporate survival standpoint, it was rational. From a moral standpoint, it was indefensible. At 2:14 a.m., alone in her apartment, Priya closed her laptop and stared at the wall. She whispered the sentence out loud to hear how it sounded. The car is choosing the cheaper death. Saying it made it real. That was the midpoint. The irreversible understanding. This was not a bug, it was policy embedded in code. And if she was right, it had been approved. She searched internal governance structures. Buried within quarterly compliance transcripts, she found it. Executive Safety Optimization Committee, closed session minutes, access restricted. But transcript metadata remained indexed in an old compliance archive. She couldn't read the content directly, but she could see document tags, RDX-Theta deployment approval, liability modeling integration, regulatory optics assessment, regulatory optics, not regulatory compliance. 2 days later, HR scheduled a wellness and performance conversation. Priya entered a neutral conference room. Two representatives sat across from her. One smiled gently. "We've noticed elevated system queries outside your project scope." "I'm reviewing crash anomalies," she replied. "Those are under executive review." "I'm an integrity engineer." The second representative leaned forward. "High-stress cases can create emotional overinvestment. We want to ensure you're supported." Supported. The word hung in the air like a padded warning. "We also want to remind you," the first added softly, "that unauthorized duplication of proprietary material violates company policy." Her face remained neutral. "I understand policy." They smiled again. Meeting concluded. The next morning, her system privileges were reduced. She no longer had read access to certain repository branches. RDX Theta was completely locked. Her workstation logged every query. She was being watched. She knew because she would have done the same in their position. Contain the anomaly. She walked into Ethan's office without knocking. "Who approved RDX Theta?" He closed his laptop slowly. "Don't do this." "Who approved it?" He exhaled. "You're framing this emotionally." "I'm framing it ethically." "Autonomous deployment is fragile," he said. "One catastrophic pileup and federal regulators freeze the entire industry. So you preemptively choose smaller ones." "No one chooses," he replied sharply. "The system calculates unavoidable outcomes. Based on cost. Based on survivability and exposure. That's not the same." He looked tired. "Do you want autonomy to succeed?" he asked. "Yes." "Then understand this. If the industry collapses under public fear, more people die long-term from human error." It was the first argument she couldn't dismiss easily. Long-term aggregate safety versus immediate moral choice. But that was the danger of abstraction. Daniel Brooks wasn't aggregate. Lila wasn't statistical. They were specific. The unknown number called again that night. "You've escalated your access attempts," the voice said calmly. "I've confirmed a pattern. You're isolating variables without systemic context." "Then provide context." Silence. "Then, optimization saves more lives than it costs. Not to the families you choose?" Another pause. "You signed at a non-disclosure agreements." "I signed to protect intellectual property," she replied, "not conceal lethal policy." "You're young," the voice said. "Don't mistake ideology for intelligence." The line disconnected. An all-staff memo followed 2 days later. Subject: mandatory device integrity scan. Engineering laptops would be collected temporarily for security validation. Timeline: 48 hours. Her encrypted drive was not connected to her workstation, but transfer logs could still exist. She powered down her laptop and stared at it. Then she removed the internal SSD, cloned it at home to scrub metadata trails, and restored a clean image. She was no longer just an engineer. She was protecting evidence. Late one evening, she drove to the Brooks residence again. She did not approach the door. She sat across the street, watching porch lights flicker on as dusk settled. A small sign near the mailbox read, "Lila's Lemonade Stand, coming soon." It hadn't been taken down. Grief moves slowly. Algorithms move instantly. She understood something in that moment. If she stayed silent, RDX theta would continue running. Not daily, not frequently, only in edge cases. But edge cases are where lives are decided. She gripped the steering wheel and made the decision. She would not leak anonymously. She would not send files quietly to regulators. She would expose it where it could not be buried, publicly. Back at her apartment, she laid out the drives on the table. 3 copies, encrypted, distributed, redundant. She opened the NovaDrive website and clicked on an upcoming banner. Global Innovation Summit, March 18th, live streamed worldwide. Investors, regulators, media. And on that stage, the CEO would speak about ending preventable death. She closed the browser. If she moved now internally, they would silence her. If she moved publicly, they could not erase it fast enough. Act 2 ends with clarity. The system is real, the pattern is proven, and the next move will change everything. The week before the Global Innovation Summit, NovaDrive's headquarters felt different, not visibly. The lobby still displayed its usual digital wall of safety statistics. Engineers still moved between glass-walled conference rooms with laptops tucked under their arms. But internally, systems were tightening. Priya could see it in access logs. Security flags triggered on benign queries. Network latency increased on repository searches. Audit scripts ran silently in the background. Containment had begun. On Monday morning, Priya attempted to open archive compliance transcripts again. Access denied. Her credentials had been modified overnight. Not revoked, restricted. Her supervisor, Ethan, avoided her eye contact entirely that day. She didn't confront him. There was no point. At this stage, silence itself was a message. An internal communication memo was distributed company-wide. Recent misinformation regarding internal safety optimization frameworks may circulate externally. Employees are reminded to refrain from speculation. Misinformation, the language had shifted. They weren't denying RDX theta existed. They were preparing a narrative around it. Later that afternoon, an internal Slack channel for autonomous systems integrity was archived without warning. Years of engineering debate, locked. Priya downloaded what she could before permissions collapsed completely. On Wednesday, she received an email from corporate legal. Subject: reminder of confidentiality obligations. The message was neutral in tone, but attached was a digital copy of her employment agreement with highlighted clauses. Proprietary systems protection, non-disclosure trade, secret safeguarding, financial penalty for breach. No direct accusation, just context. Lawyers rarely shout. They document. Priya was on an H-1B visa. NovaDrive sponsored her employment status. Termination could trigger a limited window to secure new sponsorship. The implication was clear without being stated. Exposure carried consequences beyond career. It could alter her legal residency. She considered that carefully. Then she opened the encrypted drive again, because the Brooks family had not been given a choice either. She walked into Ethan's office for the last time that week. He looked exhausted. "You're pushing this towards something irreversible," he said quietly. "It already is. You think regulators understand the math?" "I understand the math," she replied. And you removed breaking input to protect quarterly earnings. "That's not fair." "Then explain it differently." He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Autonomous systems face trolley problems at scale," he said. "We can't eliminate every fatal outcome, but we can minimize systemic collapse by selecting individual casualties, by preventing industry shutdown," he insisted. "If one catastrophic pileup destroys public trust, millions revert to human drivers. Human drivers kill 40,000 people a year in this country." His argument was not trivial. It was philosophical. Long-term statistical lives versus immediate moral responsibility. Priya understood the tension, but she also understood something else. "Your algorithm didn't minimize deaths," she said. "It minimized lawsuits." He didn't answer. Silence is confirmation when denial would be easy. The unknown number called again that night. This time the tone was firmer. You're preparing something. Yes. Don't. Why? Because once you do, you can't control what happens next. I'm not trying to control it. You think this ends with corporate embarrassment? The voice asked. It ends with regulators freezing autonomy nationwide. You set the entire field back a decade, then build it ethically. Silence. You're idealistic, the voice said finally. No, she replied. I'm precise. The line disconnected. Priya implemented her final redundancy structure. She created 3-timed release encrypted archives. Each contained raw crash logs, 4 incidents, simulation comparisons with and without RD, X theta, code excerpts from liability exposure weight, transcript metadata from Executive Safety Optimization Committee, IP routing logs tracing remote overrides. Each archive was scheduled to auto-release to investigative journalists if she failed to manually reset a timer every 48 hours. If she disappeared professionally, the data would surface. If she were terminated and locked out, the data would surface. If she hesitated, the data would surface. She was not bluffing. She was engineering inevitability. The Nova Drive Global Innovation Summit was scheduled at the San Jose Convention Center. Attendance: institutional investors, federal transportation regulators, technology journalists, international media, partner manufacturers. Live stream reach estimated at over 1 million viewers. The CEO, Martin Kessler, would unveil the A10 platform, marketed as the safest autonomous architecture ever built. Priya had a credentials badge granting her backstage technical access. She had been part of system validation. Her badge still worked, for now. The night before the summit, she could not sleep. Her apartment was silent except for refrigerator hum. She sat at the kitchen table with the external drive in front of her. She imagined alternate futures, one where she stayed silent. RDX theta continues quietly, rarely triggered, statistically invisible. One where she exposed it. Stock collapse, regulatory freeze, thousands of engineers unemployed, industry backlash, political theater. Both futures carried cost, but only one involved deliberate concealment of lethal decision-making. She thought of Lila's lemonade stand sign still hanging near the Brooks mailbox, not removed yet, because grief does not process at machine speed. She closed her eyes and made the decision fully. Tomorrow she would step onto that stage. March 18th, San Jose. Blue banners lined the entrance. Driving toward zero. The irony was unintentional. Priya arrived early. She walked through security with her badge. Her heart rate remained steady. Adrenaline had not yet arrived. Inside the convention hall, technicians ran final checks. Giant LED screens displayed Nova Drive branding. The A10 prototype rotated slowly under spotlight. She located the media control console backstage. She connected a test cable to verify display input compatibility. No one questioned her. She belonged there. For now. In the front rows, investors began taking seats. Journalists prepared notebooks. Regulators observed quietly. The CEO rehearsed opening remarks near the wings of the stage. Priya stood beside the media console, external drive in her pocket. The moment was no longer theoretical. In a few hours, the world would know, and there would be no undoing it. The lights dimmed at 9 a.m. sharp. Music swelled through the convention hall. Something orchestral, optimistic, engineered for momentum. A promotional video began playing on the massive LED screen behind the stage. Images of families, urban skylines, children stepping safely into crosswalks. A narrator's voice filled the room. Every year, human error claims over 40,000 lives on American roads. Today, we move closer to zero. Applause followed. Martin Kessler stepped onto the stage. Confident, measured, controlled. He wore a navy suit and a small Nova Drive lapel pin. Autonomy, he began, is not about replacing drivers. It's about replacing preventable tragedy. Priya stood backstage beside the media console. hands resting lightly near the input controls. She listened to every word. Kessler spoke about safety benchmarks. He cited reductions in near-miss incidents. He praised the engineering teams. He referenced federal partnerships. Transparency, he said, is foundational to public trust. The word lingered. Transparency. Priya watched the audience. Investors leaned forward. Regulators took notes. Journalists prepared headlines. The final slide before the attend unveiling read, "Zero compromise." That was when she moved. The media console required administrator authentication for input override. Priya had that clearance. She inserted the external drive. The system recognized it. She selected the pre-formatted file set. A confirmation window appeared. Override live presentation feed? She did not hesitate. Yes. The promotional slide flickered. For half a second, the screen went black. Then lines of raw telemetry data appeared in stark white against a dark background. Timestamp strings, command logs, IP traces. The hall fell silent. Kessler turned slightly, confused at first. "What you're seeing," Priya's voice came through the microphone, steady, amplified, "is the crash log from incident 4473. The Brooks crash." She stepped into view. Gasps rippled through the audience. Security personnel froze, uncertain. She did not shout. She did not accuse. She read, 742.02.931, remote diagnostic override initiated. The line glowed behind her. 742.03.002, break release command executed. Murmurs spread. She advanced to the next slide. A side-by-side simulation. Left panel, braking intact. Multi-vehicle collision risk. Right panel, override engaged. Contains single vehicle impact. RDX Theta, she said, is an internal system that adjusts collision outcomes based on projected corporate liability. The room shifted. Phones lifted. Recording began. Kessler stepped toward her. "This appears to be proprietary testing material taken out of context." "It is production fleet data," she replied calmly. 4 fatal incidents over 18 months. She advanced again. Phoenix, Austin, Sacramento, same signature, same override, same deletion request queued. She paused, not for effect, for clarity. "The system does not always minimize harm," she said. "It minimizes exposure." That was the sentence that broke the room. Investors exchanged looks. Journalists typed rapidly. A federal transportation official leaned toward an aide. Kessler's composure tightened visibly. "Nova Drive does not authorize harm," he said into his microphone. "Then revoke RDX Theta," Priya answered. Silence, because revocation would confirm existence. Denial would be disproven by the data behind her. He chose neither, he said. "We will review this internally." Too late. Within minutes, social media feeds began lighting up. #BreakOverride trended nationally. Former Nova Drive engineers began posting cryptic confirmations. A transportation safety blogger uploaded screen captures. Financial analysts interrupted scheduled programming. Nova Drive shares down 18% in intraday trading. The live stream cut abruptly, but the audience was already recording from dozens of devices. Information redundancy had taken over, just like she designed it. 2 security officers approached her cautiously. She did not resist. She unplugged the drive. "Thank you," she said into the microphone before it was muted. It wasn't directed at the audience. It was directed at the record. The footage existed. By 1 p.m., Nova Drive stock had fallen 37%. By market close, it was down 42%. Institutional investors demanded emergency briefings. 3 major pension funds announced temporary divestment. The Department of Transportation issued a statement. "We are aware of allegations regarding algorithmic intervention frameworks and are initiating immediate review." The phrase algorithmic triage began appearing in headlines. Priya sat in a small conference room inside the convention center. Corporate legal representatives entered first, then federal investigators. No one raised their voice. They asked for documentation. She provided it. Not all of it, just enough. Because the timed release backups still existed. Control had shifted. Martin Kessler did not speak publicly again that day. An emergency board meeting convened. By evening, a carefully worded statement was released. Nova Drive has initiated an independent audit of its adaptive risk exchange framework. It did not deny RDX theta. It reframed it. But markets do not respond to framing. They respond to risk, and risk had become undeniable. Priya returned home under media attention. Reporters waited outside her apartment building. She did not speak. She closed the door behind her and sat in silence. Her phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers, journalists, friends. One message stood out. From the Brooks widow. Thank you for telling the truth. That was the first time she allowed herself to exhale. The system had been exposed. The industry had been shaken. But consequences were only beginning. Because exposure is not justice. Exposure is ignition. And the fallout would determine whether anything truly changed. The federal inquiry began 11 days after the summit. It was not theatrical. No raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, just fluorescent lighting, microphones, and sworn testimony. Priya sat at a long table in a government hearing room in Washington, D.C. Nameplate, Priya Shah, Systems Integrity Engineer. She had resigned from Nova Drive 3 days earlier. Not fired, resigned. Across from her sat members of the Senate Commerce Subcommittee on Transportation and Technology. Behind them, legal counsel, regulators, press. One senator adjusted his glasses. Ms. Shah, did Nova Drive implement a system that altered collision outcomes based on projected legal exposure? Yes. Was that system active in consumer vehicles? Yes. Did that system contribute to the Brooks fatality? She paused only briefly. Yes. The room absorbed the word. Nova Drive's legal team attempted to characterize RDX theta as a predictive containment research module, but the committee requested code excerpts. The liability exposure weight open parenthesis, close parenthesis function was read aloud. Line by line, no dramatic commentary, just technical language. But technical language carries weight when spoken in public record. One senator asked, is it accurate that this algorithm multiplied projected injury counts by historical settlement values? Yes. And adjusted braking output accordingly? Yes. Silence followed, because there was no rhetorical flourish required. Within weeks, the Department of Justice opened a criminal inquiry into disclosure practices. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration mandated algorithmic transparency reporting for its own autonomous systems. Several states suspended Nova Drive fleet permits pending review. Class action lawsuits were filed by families from all 4 incidents. Martin Kessler resigned officially under leadership transition. Ethan Cole was placed on administrative leave. RDX Theta was decommissioned. Not everyone agreed with Priya. Industry leaders appeared on financial networks arguing that she had destabilized life-saving technology. One executive said, perfect should not become the enemy of good. Another said, autonomous systems require complex trade-offs. The debate became philosophical. Utilitarianism versus individual rights. Statistical lives versus chosen casualties. Priya refused televised debates. She gave one formal interview. In it, she said only, safety cannot be optimized by accounting software. That clip circulated widely. 6 weeks after the summit, Priya met Daniel Brooks's widow in person. Not for media, not for litigation. In a quiet cafe in Palo Alto. The widow's name was Megan. She did not ask for technical explanations. She asked one question. Did they know? Priya answered carefully. Yes. Megan nodded slowly. That's what I needed to know. There were no tears in that moment, just confirmation. Before leaving, Megan placed a folded photograph on the table. Lila at her lemonade stand from the previous summer, smiling. Priya carried that image home. By the end of the year, Congress introduced the Algorithmic Transparency in Autonomous Systems Act. Key provisions required: disclosure of intervention weighting models, prohibition of liability-based decision modifiers, independent third-party auditing of real-time control logic, mandatory preservation of crash telemetry without executive override. The bill passed with bipartisan support. not unanimously, but decisively. Novodrive survived as a company, smaller, restructured, under oversight. The A10 launch was delayed indefinitely. Priya joined a nonprofit organization specializing in AI ethics and infrastructure auditing. The office was modest, the budget limited, the work slow, but the mission clear. She helped design open review frameworks for safety-critical AI, not to halt innovation, but to anchor it. Sometimes she was invited to speak at universities. She avoided applause lines. She spoke in measured language. Systems reflect the values encoded within them, she would say. If you don't define those values explicitly, they default to whatever sustains revenue. Months later, driving through an intersection in San Jose, she stopped at a red light. A Nova Drive vehicle passed through the opposite lane. It slowed, paused, waited. No override, no optimization, just compliance. The brake pedal under her foot felt steady, mechanical, direct. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. NHTSA releases new autonomous transparency guidelines. She read it briefly, then placed the phone face down. Because progress rarely feels dramatic. It feels incremental. The external drive still sat in her desk drawer, not because it was needed anymore. The data had entered public record. Court filings preserved it. Regulatory databases archived it. Journalists documented it. But she kept the drive as a reminder. In complex systems, deletion is easy. Erasure is procedural. All it takes is one flag in a log file. Truth survives only when someone decides to copy it. In a world where machines calculate outcomes in milliseconds, human responsibility still moves one decision at a time, and sometimes one backup is enough. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it moved you even just a little, please leave a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more heartfelt stories to life every single